Lesson number third, Henry. Okay, so here you can see first see this activity. Given below are descriptions of some famous animal characters. Match to them to the animals they describe. Okay, so this is your homework. What you have to do, you have to match this column A to these pictures that are given in column B. Okay, you have to read these descriptions of some famous characters, animal characters, and then you have to match these descriptions to these animals. Okay, answers I will give you in the next video. Now, let's begin our story. So, here Henry is a pet chameleon, and this story is written by Ruskin Bond. So, let's first of all know about Ruskin Bond. Ruskin Bond is born in Himachal Pradesh, India, and he has written many poems and stories for children. Okay, so this story as a whole, I can say, is written in very simple and clear language, and the main motive in is to highlight the human and animal relationship in the most funny way. Okay, so now let's begin this story, and then you will get to know. This is a story of Henry, our pet chameleon. So the narrator is saying that this is a story of Henry, our pet chameleon. Chameleons are no ordinary reptiles. They are easily distinguished by certain outstanding marks from their nearest relatives, the lizard. As you can see here, this is a chameleon and it looks like a lizard. And they can easily be distinguished, means they can easily be differentiated by some certain marks from their nearest relatives, lizards. A chameleon's tongue is as long as its body. On its head is a rigid crest which looks like a fireman's helmet, means there is a hard skin on the head of the chameleon which looks like a fireman's helmet. Its limbs are long and slender, and its fingers and toes are more developed than those of other reptiles. So here the characteristics of chameleons is told, and many people believe that the chameleon is a dangerous and poisonous reptile. Okay, so many people believe that it is very dangerous and very poisonous reptile. So in this story, we will find what it is. Okay, now when grandfather was visiting a friend, he came upon a noisy scene at the garden gate. Men were shouting, hurling stones, and brandishing sticks. The cause of all this was a chameleon who had been discovered sunning himself on the shrub, as you can see here. The gardener declared that it was a thing capable of poisoning a pupil at a distance of 20 feet, and as a result, the entire household had risen in arms. So here in this paragraph, it is told that when the narrator's grandfather was visiting one of his friends, he saw that people were shouting. Okay, and then he found out that the reason behind this their shouting, as you can see here in this picture also, the reason behind their shouting was none other than this small chameleon, and people were all busy in shouting, throwing stones on it, and waving sticks. Brandishing sticks means they were waving stick and all, like, in order to beat that chameleon. Okay, beat this chameleon. The gardener said that it can poison at 20 feet. Even if people were standing at 20 feet away, they can be poisoned by this chameleon. So people got even more afraid, and they were very angry. They have risen in arms. Okay, so they were trying to kill this chameleon. Understood? Then grandfather was in time to save the chameleon from certain death and brought the little reptile home. That chameleon was Henry, and that was how he came to live with us. So after grandfather saw the chameleon was facing problem as people were trying to kill it, As you can see here in this picture, people are trying to kill this chameleon. So he saved this chameleon and he brought the little reptile home. And that chameleon was none other than Henry. That's how he started to live with them. Understood? Now, Henry was a harmless creature provided it was patient. Henry was willing to take food from my hands. This he did very swiftly. His tongue was the sort which came back to him with the food and insect attached to it before I could realize what had happened. The grasshopper held between my fingers would be lodged between Henry's jaws. हेनरी वॉज अ हार्मलेस क्रिएचर मीन्स वो किसी को हार्म नहीं करता था, नुकसान नहीं पहुंचाता था. So the and provided I was patient. So the narrator is saying that if he's patient, if the narrator is patient, Henry was willing to take food from my hand. Means even Henry can take the food from the hand of the narrator. Okay, this he did very swiftly, means he can take the food from the narrator's hand very swiftly, means very fast. His tongue was the sort which came back to him with the food and insect attached to it. Means he can stick the food with his tongue, and that after from the narrator's hand, and he just takes the tongue back to his mouth very swiftly, means very fast. But provided that that boy was very patient with the chameleon, with Henry. Okay, so he considered it as a harmless creature and he was very patient towards Henry. And as he was giving food to Henry with his hand, Henry took the food, the grasshopper. That was a grasshopper that was held between the fingers of the boy, that the narrator, and Henry just very swiftly take that grasshopper from his hand between his jaws. Understood? हेनरी बहुत ही जल्दी से एकदम बहुत ही स्विफ्टली, बहुत ही तेज़ी से, बहुत ही फास्टली वो नैरेटर के हैंड से फूड को लेकर अपनी टंग से स्टिक करके एकदम से अपने मुंह तक ले जाता था, मुंह में ले जाता. Henry did not cause trouble in their house, but he did create something like a riot in the nursery school down the road. It happened like this. Henry did not cause trouble in their house. Means उनके घर में उसने कुछ भी trouble cause नहीं किया था, but he did create something like a riot in the nursery school down the road. And how it happened, we will see now in this story. When the papaya in our garden were ripe, grandmother usually sent a basket of them to her friend Mrs. Ghosh, who was the principal of the nursery school. When the papayas were ripened in their garden, grandmother, means the narrator's grandmother, sent the papayas to her friend Mrs. Ghosh. And who is Mrs. Ghosh? Mrs. Ghosh is the principal of the nursery school. Okay, down the road. On this occasion, Henry managed to smuggle himself into the basket of papayas when no one was looking. So, when Mrs. Ghosh uh, was packing the papayas in the basket, were keeping the papayas in the basket. So, when nobody was looking towards that basket, Henry smuggled into the basket of papayas. So so Henry hid himself, छुप गया in the basket of the papayas. ओके बहुत ही चुपचाप, जब कोई नहीं देख रहा था उसको, वो जाकर पपायास की बास्केट में छुप गया. Hid himself into the basket of papayas. Now, the gardener dutifully carried the papayas across to the school and took them into Mrs. Ghosh's office. So the gardener now, who is doing his duty, carried those papayas, basket of papayas, to the school and kept it in Mrs. Ghosh's office. Okay, now when Mrs. Ghosh came in after making her rounds, she began admiring and examining the papayas. Out popped Henry. Means when Mrs. Ghosh, that is she was the principal of the nursery school. So when she finished her rounds and when she came back, she was looking at the papayas. What she found, while she was looking at the papayas, what she found, popped out Henry. Henry अचानक से पॉप आउट हो गया, पॉप होकर बाहर, मतलब उछलकर बाहर आ गया बास्केट में से. Now Mrs. Koch screamed. Henry would probably have liked to blush a deep red, but he turned a bright green instead, as that was the color of the papayas. So Henry Mrs. Ghosh screamed after seeing Henry popping out of the basket of papayas. Henry would probably have liked to blush in deep red. Henry liked to blush in. As you know that the chameleons has the capability to change color according to their surroundings. This is known as camouflage. So what do you mean by camouflage? Camouflage means when the animals can change their color according to their surroundings or if they are in danger. Okay, so Henry blushed in deep red color, but he turned a bright green instead because the color of the papayas were green. Mrs. Koch assistant, Miss Daniels, rushed in, took one look at the chameleon, and joined in the screaming. Henry took fright and fled from the office, running down the corridor and into one of the classrooms. So, now what happened? Now, Miss Daniels, who was Miss Daniel? Miss Daniel was the assistant of Mrs. Koch. So, as when she entered the office of Mrs. Koch, she just looked at the chameleon, and after looking at the chameleon, she also started screaming. Mrs. Ghosh was also screaming, she was shouting, and Miss Daniels also started screaming. So after hearing the shouting, Henry got frightened and he fled from the office, and running down the corridor, she reached into one of the classrooms. Now, there he climbed onto a desk while the children ran in all directions, some to get away from the Henry, then some to catch him. But Henry made his exit through a window and disappeared into the garden. Now, Henry, after making all the trouble in the office, after all the trouble that he caused at the office, now he reached one of the classroom, and in the classroom he climbed on the desk, and all the children that were in the classroom, they started running in all the directions, some to catch Henry, some are afraid of Henry, and some are trying to get away from the Henry, and they all started running in all the directions. Means वो देख बच्चे Henry को देख के डर गए और इधर उधर भागने लगे, कुछ उसको पकड़ने के लिए, कुछ उससे डर के भाग रहे थे. Then Henry made his exit through a window and disappeared into the garden. Grandmother heard all about the incident from Mrs. Ghosh but did not tell her that the chameleon was ours. I did not think Henry would find his way back to us because the school was 3 houses away, but 3 days later I found him sunning himself on the garden wall, and he readily accepted some food from my hand. So when Mrs. Ghosh told about this incident to grandmother, but grandmother didn't tell her that chameleon was ours, means that the chameleon was Henry, their pet chameleon. ओके, सो व्हेन मिसेस घोष, जब मिसेस घोष ने ये सारे इंसिडेंट के बारे में जो भी वहाँ पे हुआ था ग्रैंड मदर को बताया, देन ग्रैंड मदर ने मिसेस घोष को ये नहीं बताया कि वो कैमिलियन उनका ही था. Now, the narrator is saying that I did not think Henry would find his way back to us because school was 3 houses away. Now, the narrator thought that Henry would not be able to reach back to their house because their house was 3 houses away from the school. But 3 days later, but after 3 days, the chameleon was sunning himself on the garden wall, and he again accepted food from the narrator's hand. Okay, so this was a story of Henry, the chameleon. Okay, I hope you understood this. You understood the story.